Thank you very much. I love this. There's been so much talent, so many great poems, such a cool venue, great introduction. So I'm going to be reading another story about teaching, since the last time I read a story about teaching, it went over well. But I want to just clarify, I love teaching. So if you heard that first story, or you think because of this story, I don't like my profession, I love it. I couldn't imagine doing anything else except for maybe writing. But I do love teaching, I love my students. The story I'm reading is called Summer School Incident Reports, and it's written in the type of contemporaneous memos that somebody writes when they know they're in a crazy situation. So they're snippets, dated. You should know that before I start. So, Summer School Incident Reports. June 27th. This is now the third instance Dr. Vegitelli has spoken to me aggressively. The first instance being my first day at summer school, when she wanted to let me know how things work around here. Once Dr. Vegitelli finished letting me know how things work, I asked if I could get a working air conditioner and some textbooks so that I could begin instruction. She said tomorrow. That was last week. June 28th. Charisma. Hit another student. Engages me and other students aggressively. Calls other students names like fat ass and retarded. Is constantly saying sexually vulgar things in class. Had a long and loud conversation across the room with Naz about how dykes get ass, and continued his conversation long after being told to stop. Was a constant disruption in class and could not remain in her seat. Left the room multiple times without permission. Came back from the bathroom with her hands covered in soap suds and claimed the bathroom sink didn't work. I spoke to her in reaction to these incidents privately in the hall, and the behavior did not cease. Naz uses sexually vulgar language incessantly, listens to music without permission, then sings the sexually explicit lyrics loudly to the class. Went on an endless rant about how dykes get ass, and demonstrated how dykes finger each other by making lewd gestures with his hands. Left class multiple times without permission. Was a constant disruption, could not remain in his seat. I spoke to him both in reaction to these incidents and privately in the hall, and the behavior did not cease. June 29th. Zen stared me down from the back of the room and then slowly and deliberately gave me the finger, precipitated by nothing on my part. I told her she does not want to do that. Cedric punched a student. Charisma deliberately and continuously said Ms. Rabumba's name wrong in a show of disrespect. Called her Miss Labumba, Miss Yascumba, and obviously Miss Cumbumma. Had a breakthrough with Naz. He wrote 2 whole paragraphs about how he loves his mom. Seemed to inspire other students to also write about their moms. June 30th. Dr. Vegitelli came in my room, and when the kids said good morning and asked her about her weekend, she said, "It was good, I didn't have to see you." She then looked me up and down and shook her head before leaving. What was strange is that this was a rare moment when the students were not screaming or hitting each other or being at all awful. When the students walked downstairs for lunch, she began screaming at them that they were too loud coming down the hall. She then yelled to me and Mr. X that the kids were too loud coming down the hall, and when we acknowledged her complaint politely, she did not seem satisfied. She then shook her finger and said, "No, no, no," like we were naughty children. "You can lose your tenure for what happens in summer school. Don't think this is a pass." Mr. X yelled back, "What's our policy on convicted sex offenders sharing space with 14-year-old girls, Dr. Vegitelli? Why haven't I seen security once on this floor, Dr. Vegitelli? When's that AC getting turned on, Dr. Vegitelli?" Dr. Vegitelli made a show of writing something on a piece of paper, then went back into her office. Mr. X turned to me and said, "I already have tenure." July 3rd. Cedric punched another student. Said he has mens. The other boys laughed at him and asked him to list his mens, and so then Cedric said he has a gun, And so I had to call security, and security had to call the cops. Dr. Vegetelli ranted and raved up and down the hall about how incompetent the staff was and how she is in no way responsible for a student having a gun, and that some people need to keep their mouths shut. Naz will not keep his right foot off his desk and is always showing off his ankle bracelet. Wrote a very disturbing story about beating a homeless man half to death outside the Dunkin' Donuts. Makes cunnilingus fingers at Charisma, who then makes cunnilingus fingers back at Naz. When I reprimanded Naz for his lewd behavior, he said, "Miss, what happens if I say I have a gun?" I said, "You know what happens." And I looked at Cedric's empty desk. Naz said, "That kid's a faggot, he ain't never had a gun." July 6th. Zen stood in front of my desk at 8 a.m., stared me squarely in the eye, and then guzzled an entire bottle of C&C pineapple soda. She then opened a jumbo pixie stick and began pouring the sugar into her mouth. I reminded her that we provide breakfast and that maybe this was not the best way to start her day. She swallowed the lump of sugar, cleared her mouth with her tongue, and then told me to fuck myself. July 10th. I went to the room next to mine to see if Mr. X had spare chalk. His room had more students than mine, which had more than was legal. 2 boys were taunting a large-chested girl and grabbing her inappropriately. 2 more boys were in the back of the room play fighting, but the play fighting was clearly escalating. The boy in the back was playing with his erection, but he was also completing his math problem. I asked the teacher how he was doing. He told me he was fine. I asked if he had any chalk. He said he didn't. I asked if he had any behavioral problems. He said this was blood money. He handed me a half-smoked joint inside a bundle of toilet tissue and said Dr. Vegetelli was a cunt. July 12th. Had a meeting with Dr. Vegetelli and Cedric's mom. Cedric's mom said he had no gun and that I blew everything out of proportion. I said I believe that he doesn't have a gun, but we can't ignore those kinds of threats. Dr. Vegetelli shushed me. July 15th. Charisma hasn't been in class all week. When I asked the other students if they heard from her, Naz said she moved to Florida. I said when I was a kid, other kids always said they were moving to Florida, but they never actually moved to Florida. Naz asked me what I was getting at, and I said that I was getting at that I don't believe Charisma moved to Florida. Genesis in the back, who was quiet all summer, suddenly flipped out on me and said that she knows that Charisma moved to Florida because Charisma's grandmother died, and that's who she was living with, and now she had to go stay with her crackhead mother, so I shouldn't call people liars. Naz said he was a Christian man, and so he don't fuck with people like me. I apologized, but Genesis said she doesn't have to forgive me. Nobody completed the assignment I had on the board, but instead carried on a long, loud, and unnecessarily aggressive conversation about their Christian beliefs, which then somehow segued into line dancing. When I stood up to try the moves, the kids finally sat down. July 16th. Cedric returned to school with a gun. The police came. Vegetelli had to call the superintendent, who had to give a statement to the local paper. Turned out Cedric had aged out of public school and shouldn't have been there in the first place. Mr. X said, this shit happens all the time. July 20th. Charisma returned to school with a black eye. I asked her about Florida. She said, bitch, fuck Florida. Then she looked at me and said, sorry. She sat down at her desk and opened up her notebook. Miss, she said, I'm going to do my work from now on. She returned to the very first assignment from the first day of summer school. She completed 4 weeks of work over the course of 4 hours. When Naz tried to make finger fuck hand motions to her, she ignored him, and he called her a bitch, and then left the room without permission. July 21st. At the end of class, Zen stayed at her desk and did not leave when she was supposed to. She waited until the others left before she walked slowly and menacingly to my desk. She opened her book bag and pulled out a small white box. She placed the box on my desk and told me to open it. Inside was a red velvet cupcake. She told me happy birthday. I said, how did she know it was my birthday? She said she saw it on my LinkedIn page. I said, why was she on my LinkedIn page? She said, eat the fucking cupcake. I ate the fucking cupcake while she watched. July 23rd. Cedric's mom was in the office this morning. Dr. Vegetelli sneered at me as I walked past. Hey, she shouted. Hey, I'm talking to you. I backtracked, peeked into the office to see if she was talking to me. What? She said. Were you calling me? I asked. Get in here, she said. I walked in and Dr. Vegetelli glared at me. Cedric's mother was weeping and begging to let her son graduate. How long have you been here? Dr. Vegetelli asked. I just got in, I said. No, she said. How long have you been in the district? A couple of years, I said. I known that kid since grammar school, Dr. Vegetelli said. I known all these kids since grammar school. Tell this mom why her son won't graduate. He had a gun, I said. That's not what I asked you, Dr. Vegetelli said. I don't understand the question then, I said. You're smug, she said, and I don't like you. Okay, I said. Felt like I was going to cry and that she was going to fire me, even though I know she can't actually fire me. The office smelled like marijuana and baby powder. I took a closer look around and saw that the office couch was dusted white. Is that baby powder on the couch? I asked. I have a gun, Dr. Vegetelli said. What? I said. I have a gun, she repeated. Lots of people have guns and it doesn't mean anything. July 29th. The only students who showed up for the last day of school to take the final were Charisma and Genesis. Genesis put her head down on the desk and slept. Charisma worked steadily through the morning. By 11 a.m., we started to hear a purr coming from the vents, and it sounded like an animal. Charisma stood and walked to the windows where the ventilation system was. It's the fucking AC, she said. What? I said. It's the fucking AC. It's cold air coming on. We stood by the vents and felt for the air. Behind the purr, I swear I could hear Mr. X next door weeping. Thank you.
Awesome.